It's happened to the cave where the echoes bounce, in the depths where the whispers of knowledge count. A place not just of dark, but of light where ideas clash and take flight. K4 on the beat, in the labyrinth deep, navigating mysteries that the cave keeps. Every step a new discovery, every turn a story untold inside the cave where the shadows unfold. Inside the cave where the shadows unfold.
Finding secrets that the universe keeps, from the echoes of the past to the whispers of the new. Inside the cave, find the truth. Walls lined with the beats of history's hard and new. Inside the cave, find the truth. We find the truth.
This is our first installment in the Murder Mysteries segment, and tonight we're going to be talking about the Zodiac Killer. But before we get on and forward with that, I want to bring on our co-host for the evening. You guys know him. His name is Chef. Welcome to the show, Chef.
Oh man, this is going to be exciting. I'm excited for this one.
Definitely.
Super excited for this one.
This is something we've been working on, so we're gonna test the waters here. It's not gonna be a perfect it's not gonna be perfect, but we hope that it's entertaining enough that we can build off of it. But yeah, so like I said, we're gonna be talking about the Zodiac Killer. Now, for those who don't know about the Zodiac Killer, which would be weird, he is an infamous murderer that till this day hasn't been caught, and it could be that they'll never catch him because these string of murders that he committed happened in the 60s and 70s, and he could be dead by now, and you know he got away with it, and we'll never know. But we're gonna break down as we get on with the podcast. We're gonna break down possibilities and just a bunch of things surrounding him, like evidence that could prove who the Zodiac Killer is. But yeah, so with that being said, we're going to go ahead and give you guys a brief intro on him. The Zodiac Killer terrorized the San Francisco Bay Area in the late 1960s and early 1970s, leaving a trail of unsolved murders, cryptic messages, and unanswered questions in his wake. His reign of terror began in December of 1968 with brutal killings of high school students Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday. And it continued with a series of chilling attacks that struck fear into the hearts of the community. Sorry, guys. But yeah, so that was where he started, and his motive, no one really understood what the motive was, I believe. I do have my notes on that, and we're going to talk about it, but it just seemed like he just did it for the thrill. That's my takeaway from it, at least. I don't know, Chef, what do you think?
Yeah, it seems to me, based on what I've gathered and what I've researched, is that, yeah, he's definitely a psychopath.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like these were crimes of passion. So it wasn't necessarily like a vengeance that he was trying to avenge,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it was the act, the art, not the art. I guess to a serial killer there is an art to it. So
right.
I will stand by that. But yeah, I think he just got a thrill out of the actual acts of murdering. And I mean, according to what he has claimed, there's been, I want to say, like 35 or 32 killings that he claims to be responsible for.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of a weird one too, right? Because he still to this day has not been identified.
Yeah.
But based on like other crime mysteries that I have found out, some people like to do like copycat killings. They like to copy other famous people, and they also like to give themselves credit on things that they never did. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think, you brought up a good point, because I never considered that there would be copycat killers for the Zodiac Killer. Maybe someone who was obsessed with it and, drew a fandom, which is weird that serial killers, they do, as fucked up as it sounds, that they do have fans, there's fans of what they do. But really, to me, what set the Zodiac Killer apart was not just the brutality of his crimes, but also how he was taunting with letters and cryptic ciphers that he sent to the newspapers and law enforcement agencies. These communications often include details about the murders that only the killer would know, adding to the mystery and frustration of investigators. Like, people thought that this guy was just writing letters like, oh yeah, he's claiming he's the killer, right? And what it so turned out to be is like he actually wrote down every detail, which led him to believe like, holy shit, this is the killer sending this letter. And obviously at a time back then, it wasn't like where you could just track someone down. Nowadays, it's so easy to track someone. I mean, we know how we're being tracked with everything nowadays, but back then it seemed like a lot of murderers would get away with things.
Yeah, even the which might be another topic for or another murderer for another episode, but I believe it was the Golden Gate Killer, I believe was his name. And obviously that's going to be in the San Francisco Bay Area as well. Well, he ended up getting popped years down the line due to, it was either Ancestry.com or 23andMe or one of those DNA based family trees companies. Mm-hmm. And he ended up getting popped like that because they ended up having his DNA and was able to track him down to, other family members. And he got arrested, I think, like 5 or 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems to me that, with that being said, that kind of gives me some clues to the Zodiac Killer, right? Because everyone's doing the...
It's crazy.
Sorry,
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just... What's really interesting about the Zodiac Killer is, like, even to this day, people are so curious about, like, what happened and who is it? And it's just one of those things I personally believe we're never going to solve, because, like I said earlier when we started the show, is that the killer could be dead already and we wouldn't know. And he actually has had a profound cultural impact, and he continues to fascinate people around the world for several reasons, whether it's like the media attention. He garnered a lot of media attention. It received extensive media coverage during the Zodiac Killer's reign of terror, as they like to call it. And the newspapers were publishing his cryptic letters and details of the murders in hopes the public would know how to help solve the cryptic letters, because the cryptic letters were very hard to crack. And for me, I was thinking, man, what if he's just writing these cryptic letters and it's just a bunch of mumbo jumbo and he's just throwing people off his trail? They're so captivated with these cryptic letters that they're not, focusing on the casing. We're like, what does it say? And there he goes. He's going to go kill someone again because you're so captivated by his messages, right? And I think because of the fact that this remains unsolved to this day, a lot of people, there's that, it maintains that level of curiosity for a lot of people. I mean, for you and I myself, as fans of murder mysteries, that's just always there's like a chilling feel to this stuff, and it's just it's a very creepy, eerie feel, but it just draws you in. And the mystery about his identity and motives and fate has led to countless theories and speculation over the years, keeping the case in public consciousness. So even to this day, like we could have a next he might spawn a next generation of people who want to do this, and like you said, copycats. It's also,
and even if he is dead, like we don't know for sure, but there's obviously that possibility that he's still dead.
Yes.
What's really eerie about it is he's still alive, because as what you're saying, the presence that he has on media, the presence that he had on culture. I mean, there's been a few movies made of him, and it's crazy. It's crazy. And a lot of people, you know, I've heard mention things like this, like, why are we talking about these people? Like, we're almost putting them on a pedestal in a sense. And I get that. I get where people are coming from there, but it's just fascinating. It really is, because, you know, for me, at least growing up, and even to this day, I've always wanted to know what makes people tick, what makes people act a certain way. Whether that be someone's just an asshole, or someone is just psychotic, or someone likes to, you know, murder. Yeah. And there's just something about that. And again, you used a good adjective earlier, but it's chilling, but it still draws the curiosity from the public.
Yeah.
And it's crazy.
And obviously, like we said, this was what, in the late 60s to the early 70s when this all kind of happened. And it wasn't that the resources of like the police department then weren't like what we have now, like I said earlier, but they were going full force into this, because obviously in the San Francisco Bay Area, a lot of people were afraid because they didn't know where to go. And here's a copy of one of the actual letters he wrote, and at the very bottom is the cryptic note. And obviously he's just talking about, you know, let's see, I have become very upset with the people of San Fran Bay Area. They have not complied with my wishes for them to wear some nice buttons. I promised to punish them if they did not comply by annihilating, which he couldn't spell, a full school bus. But now school is out for the summer, so I promised them in another way. I shot a man sitting in a parked car with a .38 caliber. The map coupled with this code will tell you where the bomb is set. You have until next fall to dig it up. And apparently here's where it was. Now, this is what caused such frenzy, because he left things like, oh, I dug up a bomb. And now it's like, how we solve this before this? And the fact that it's not going to blow until next fall was crazy. It's like, did he have this bomb set for next fall? And it's very polarizing. Like, what draws me is his brain. Like, I want to pick his brain. You know? That's just what's the interesting part for me. It's like, what's going on in this guy's head? Because every serial killer, it's obviously like they're not right in the head. You know, people are always saying like, oh, well, you know, he had a mental illness. Like, oh, you think? Like, yeah, okay. You know, like the Menendez brothers, just a little off track. Like, oh, they were mentally ill. It's like, no, you think? I didn't think that fucking people who didn't have any sort of mental illness or anything was capable of just killing someone for the fun of it. But this is just what's so polarizing me, just to wonder, like, obviously a lot of them also, it's about their upbringing, right? And their environment they grew up in. And sometimes you hear a lot about like these creepy killers and what they grew up in, and you're kind of like, okay, that was kind of like the foundation. But see, the interesting thing here is we don't know that about the Zodiac Killer. He could have been in the police department and knew how to maneuver his way around. It's like, fuck it, I'm gonna kill people and they'll never catch me because I'm a cop. Or he could be a politician, and this is why this adds that extra level of secrecy, because we know zero about this guy. We just know this guy was pretty fucking crazy. That's just to say the least, right?
Yeah, no, I agree, but I never even thought that is a strong possibility, that he could have been in a police department. He could have been working with in the government or the local government politicians. And what this reminds me of is the show Dexter, because he was a crime scene investor, or I guess a crime scene blood splatter analysis, but he worked hand in hand with the cops. So he was able to be right there when they discovered something, and he would be able to like you know, throw like squirrel, like look over that way, and then
Yeah.
fix some stuff over here. But also, once we get into it, some of the suspects actually have some stuff in common. And that kind of reminds me again of back to Dexter, because some of the people that Dexter would kill were quote unquote bad people that did bad things. So,
Right.
yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and here's actually a picture from the actual first murder committed by the Zodiac Killer himself. And I believe this is, what's her name? I gotta find it. I had it in my notes here.
Is it Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday?
Yes, there it is. Yeah. So this was this is the only one I could find, obviously, just the car of where they were in. So the details of that kill, let's see, I have that written down for us. I'm gonna get it for you guys.
I just have for me, my notes, I just have something kind of brief on that. Obviously,
Right.
that they were murdered in the car.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so here it is. I have it. So the first confirmed victims of the Zodiac Killer were high school students Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday. The murder took place on December 20th, 1968 at Lake Herman Road in Benicia, California. Jensen and Faraday were on their first date and had parked Faraday's mother's car on a gravel turnout beside the road. Around 10:15 p.m., another motorist discovered their bodies. Faraday had been shot once in the head, while Jensen had been shot multiple times. The killer's motive and identity remain unknown, and this marked the beginning of the series of murders attributed to the Zodiac Killer. What's a lot of people were trying to think, was this targeted? And there's a lot of speculation on, did he know these people? And I think there's no connection. I think he just found people to kill, and that's what he went for. What do you think, Chef?
Yeah, I do. I agree with you. I think that I do think that there was a reason why he picked these people out, these particular people out, but I don't think that there was like a personal connection, or that he went into the store and saw this couple, these two teenagers, high schoolers, and then followed them. I think it was kind of random, but there's gotta be something that makes this dude tick, and there's gotta be something, because in the letter that you had posted up here just a moment ago, he mentioned something about the people of San Francisco were frustrating him, and they're not wearing the buttons. So even though like that's not necessarily like some of his other ciphers where it's literally coded, but I feel like there's something in the button. So the button means something to him. And right before he wrote buttons, that right before that line, there was his trademark signature, which is the circle with a cross through the center.
Yeah. That was like his little trademark, if you want to call it that, and let's see, I got more of his letters here for us to look at. So see, it's just, how do you solve this? For people that do solve this, I don't understand these kind of cryptic messages, and that's what's so interesting to me. Is just how does one even figure this out?
I know it's pretty
Examiner, the Chronicle, and to the Times Herald. It's just, was this guy just coming up with a bunch of hieroglyphs in his head and just writing this down, or it's like the Riddler, really. Remember, like the Riddler in the Batman movie? This was kind of like almost a symbol, and so that kind of reminded me of the Zodiac Killer, because the Riddler in the new Batman movie of Robert Pattinson, the Riddler's logo was almost like this.
Oh wow, I do remember that, and that's interesting because I remember playing the Batman video game. And the Riddler would occasionally pop up, and there would be a message popped up, and he would have a riddle. And your next like task was once you solve the riddle, it'll give you the clue on what to do next.
Yeah, and so I'm actually gonna pull up his the Riddler logo. It's something like this.
Wow, that's very, very similar.
And it's pretty cool, right? But it's just, this kind of shows the cultural impact that the Zodiac Killer has to this day, inspiring a bunch of pop culture references. He's made it into the movies. But yeah, so diving in, we kind of just covered investigating the crimes. You know, there was a number of key suspects that they had. I know that a couple of them were, so number one was Arthur Leigh Allen, and he was perhaps the most infamous suspect. He was investigated by law enforcement and portrayed as a suspect in books and films. However, the only reason why he never went to jail was because there wasn't enough evidence to conclusively link him to the crimes. However, he was such a big suspect in this. So yeah, you're shaking your head. I want to know what you think.
Yeah, well, it's just funny because he's been like never got convicted because the lack of evidence, and then yet you have the person that killed him has never been caught due to lack of evidence. And so that to me is just like, that's pretty interesting, especially him being, again, one of the more like, oh, yep, there you go, one of the more infamous suspects. But he was also, what he was convicted of, from what I've found, and he was a convicted child molester.
Was he?
That's what I came across, that he was a convicted child molester, but he, I'm sure there's a lot of other crimes that he never got convicted of.
Of course.
So that one definitely is interesting, because that goes back to my correlation between him and Dexter, because Dexter, you know, went after people that did bad things. So he was kind of playing God in that sense.
Yes. Yeah. And then it's just, did they ever say how they tried to pin it on him? Do you know? Like, how did they come and say, hey, it could be this guy, and then become wrong about it?
About Arthur Leigh Allen?
Yes.
No, that I did not. I did not come across that. So what I got right here, it says, perhaps the most infamous suspect in the Zodiac Killer case, Arthur Leigh Allen, was a convicted child molester who came under intense scrutiny by law enforcement. While Allen exhibited some suspicious behavior and had a connection to one of the Zodiac's victims, there was insufficient evidence to conclusively link him to the crime. Oh, you know what, dude? I misinterpreted this, so my apologies. He was not. These are suspects. This is not someone that was.
Oh, okay. So here you go.
Was killed.
I was kind of just digging through my notes right now, but so yeah, Arthur Leigh Allen became a suspect in the Zodiac Killer case due to a combination of circumstantial evidence, tips from acquaintances, and similarities between Allen and the composite sketches of the suspect. So as far as circumstantial evidence goes, like you said, he had a troubled history and had exhibited behaviors that some found suspicious. He had a criminal record, like you said, that related to child molestation, which raised concerns about his character. And tips from acquaintances, several individuals who knew Allen came forward with information suggesting his possible involvement in the Zodiac killings, and some claimed that Allen had made incriminating statements or exhibited behaviors consistent with the profile of the Zodiac Killer. But that it's not enough to, convict someone or like charge someone with anything, because it's all he said, she said,
Yeah. And that was sorry, that was my apologies, by the way. When I was reading this, I read in my thing the Zodiac's victim. So when I heard victim, I was thinking he was a victim of the Zodiac Killer. But yes, no. So yeah, but that's very strange. And I wonder, is it like been proven that. I mean, I guess none of them were convicted, right? All the suspects
Right.
were never convicted. There
They
just
never
wasn't
were,
enough.
because there wasn't enough. But yeah, so before we move on to our next suspect, I just want to go over the other things that kind of led the authorities to believe that Arthur Leigh Allen was the Zodiac Killer. Was also physical resemblance. There were composite sketches of the Zodiac Killer that created from witness descriptions bore a resemblance to Allen, particularly in terms of facial features and build. Now, apparently, he kind of fit, like I said, just kind of rewording it, but he fit the description of what witnesses saw. And when the composite sketches came out, he kind of had similar looks, but it still wasn't solid enough for him. And they also did a handwriting analysis on him, and they had handwriting samples from Allen that were compared to the handwriting in the Zodiac's letters, which some experts suggested there were a lot of similarities between the two. And and other experts actually disputed it and saying that, it's not conclusive evidence. Handwriting could be similar, but that doesn't mean anything. And lastly, they had a search warrant and surveillance for him. And in the early 1990s, the SFPD obtained a search warrant to search Allen's residence and car for evidence related to the Zodiac case. Allen was also placed under surveillance for a period of time as part of the investigation. But despite these suspicions and investigative efforts, no conclusive evidence linking Allen to the Zodiac killings were ever found, and he was never charged with connection in the case. Allen consistently maintained his innocence until his death in 1992. See, like what I mean? He could have been him, but he's dead now, so what are we going to do?
Damn.
Yeah. And so that leads us to another key suspect and the theory. Its name is Richard Gajkowski. Have you heard of that name?
Yes, I have.
He was the journalist who worked at a publication where some Zodiac letters were sent from. And some researchers have proposed that Gajkowski was a suspect, but they didn't have any concrete evidence to stick on him. Now, to give you guys a little background on Richard Gajkowski and how he became a suspect, was obviously because, like I said, he worked at the publication linked to the Zodiac letters, but also there was some circumstantial evidence that some theorists have pointed to circumstantial evidence linking Gajkowski to the Zodiac Killer, such as his movements and activities during the time of the murders. However, this evidence is all speculative and lacks concrete proof of his involvement. So it's kind of like, oh, sorry, we kept this guy on the screen, but it's kind of like saying Batman isn't Bruce Wayne, but I just never seen the two in the same room together, right? So that was kind of circumstantial evidence that they said, about the same time that these killings were happening, Richard was not around or something. And obviously, they also had behavioral analysis, and some experts conducted behavioral analysis of the Zodiac Killer and his communications and compared them to Gajkowski's writing style and personal traits. While there was some similarities, it wasn't subjective and ultimately was inconclusive. But you said you knew about Richard Gajkowski. Was there anything that I didn't touch on?
No, pretty much. I mean, no. I mean, other than the fact that I believe he was a radio host.
Yes.
That you kind of already mentioned that. But yeah, no, that's pretty much wraps it up. And again, we'll never know because he passed away in 2004.
Yeah, he did. And,
so there was no deathbed confessionals. So or confessions.
Sounds like a band.
Yeah.
Deathbed confessionals. But other than that, there was just there was a theory that it was multiple killers. And with that being said, like you said, like it could be copycat killers, but some theorists believe that the Zodiac murders may have been committed by more than one person, which could explain the inconsistencies in the case. Like sometimes it didn't match up. It's like, are we dealing with the same killer here? Have you heard of that? The multiple killer theory?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I guess wouldn't that kind of also kind of go hand in hand with like the copycat killers type deal where there's multiple? I mean, I guess that could be separate, right? Because you could have your copycat killers where the two killers do not know each other. I mean, other than what one of them has found out about specific like murders. But I mean, you go back and you look at the Mendez brothers, and like there could be two. I don't see why not.
Yeah.
And that would really throw the detectives and the police departments off, when they're receiving this letter, and this letter is making it seem like I'm the guy. There's one of me, but really there's two. So that would be almost like a cipher in its own right, on top of all the other ciphers that he had written.
Yeah. But so to kind of elaborate on the multiple killer theory, there were kind of key points that made the argument that was kind of made people convinced that it could be a multiple killer theory, like the variation in modus operandi. Sorry if I'm butchering that, but are you familiar with the modus operandi?
Nope.
Operandi. So the Zodiac Killer's methods varied from stabbing to shooting, suggesting that more than one person may have been responsible for the crimes. But additionally, the Zodiac Killer also targeted both men and women of different ages and backgrounds, further indicating a lack of consistency in approach. So they tried to pin it and say, like, okay, maybe he only targeted men. But then another murder happened, it was a woman. They're like, well, okay, what the fuck is he doing? So this is kind of where they kind of started drawing, hey, maybe this is more than one killer. Maybe one guy's doing this and the other one. What if one guy's doing the men, one guy's doing the women, different ages and backgrounds? So this is kind of one part of that theory, and also the geographical spread. And because the murders were in different locations, like in San Francisco Bay Area, including Benicia, Vallejo, Lake Berryessa, in San Francisco. Some proponents of the multiple killer theory believe that it would be difficult for one person to commit all these crimes without being detected. So I kind of see that, but I also think if this guy's on the run, he'll go anywhere, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But yeah, dude, I mean, I already knew that this particular case was pretty intriguing, but as we're going over this more and more and more, I'm like, man, there's just so many different layers to it.
There definitely is. But yeah, so I can finish up on this theory, and then we can kind of move on to the victims, but also witness descriptions. There were varying discrepancies in witness descriptions, obviously leading the cops to believe that, hey, there is this could be different killers, because people are saying different things that are describing the killer. But it's just, I think he was very elusive, and people in a state of shock, it's kind of hard to remember things, really. So they try to remember the best they can, and there's going to be inaccuracies for sure.
Yep.
But there was also unexplained gaps in his activity. There were periods of time during the Zodiac Killer's reign of terror where no murders or communications were attributed to him. Some proponents of the multiple killer theories speculate that these gaps could be explained by the involvement of different individuals who were not consistently active. But it's also important to note that the multiple killer theory is just one of many speculative explanations for the Zodiac Killer case, and there are limited evidence to support it. While it offers a possible explanation for the inconsistencies in the case, it remains a subject of debate among investigators and researchers. But yeah, go ahead. I cut you off.
No. All I was just going to add to is something for people to realize that these crimes all took place in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And investigators, they didn't start using DNA like analysis for like criminal investigations and what have you until the 1980s. So that's 20 years of, like, I think nowadays, I think he would have been popped, but I would also be curious to see, because I do know that the Zodiac Killer did send one of the letters that he had sent in had a piece of Alan Forgot his first name. Allen's. He was the cab driver that he shot with the 38 caliber. But he must have cut off a piece of the bloody shirt and sent that in to prove like, hey.
Yeah, he did. He was like,
yeah, I'm the guy.
Trying to give like, hey, this is really me. Like, I'm not fucking with you guys. Right. But yeah. So now we're going to move on to kind of breaking down his victims. The exact number of victims that the Zodiac Killer had is uncertain. They really don't know, but he claimed responsibility of at least 5 of them. And we're just going to run down the names real quick. That, like I said earlier, it was David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen. His first murder, that was on December 20th, 1968. And then his next victim were Darlene Farron and Michael Maggio, and they were shot on 4th of July in 1969. So nearly a year later, he committed a murder. But Michael survived, and Farron died from her injuries. That was worth noting. Michael didn't die.
Interesting.
You had Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard. They were stabbed on September 27th, 1969 at Lake Berryessa in Napa County. Hartnell survived, but Shepard died from her injuries. So as a Zodiac Killer, I'm sure that kind of bothered him that he left. Or maybe that was intentional to say like, hey, now you can tell my story, because there's people out there who do that, you hear it's like, and then lastly, you have that he confirmed was Paul Stein, who was shot on October 11, 1969 in San Francisco, California. He was the final confirmed killer he was a final confirmed victim for the Zodiac Killer. But also, it's also worth noting that in addition to these confirmed victims, the Zodiac Killer is believed to have been responsible for other unsolved murders and attacks in the San Francisco Bay Area during the late 1960s and early 1970s. Also, some researchers have proposed potential connections between the Zodiac Killer and other unsolved cases, but the links remain speculative. Overall, the exact number of victims the Zodiac Killer made will never be determined at this point. But there's a lot of people who believe that he's killed a lot more. But it's just could be missing people that were never found around the same times, those links. But yeah.
Yeah, I would assume like anyone around the 60s in the San Francisco Bay Area during that time, and you're seeing all this stuff on the news, and then so goes missing. I'm sure that they would attribute those missing people to have been fallen victims of the Zodiac Killer.
Right.
That would make sense to me, right? During that time. And yeah. I can only imagine, man. I can only imagine the fear, and you kind of mentioned this earlier, but the fear in all of those people that lived in that area, as they keep popping up, and yet there's no eggs in the basket, man. They don't got no evidence for the most part. They don't incriminating evidence, I guess you'd say. Nothing that would actually imply that they know who killed them. So that's got to just be that alone has got to be just a really eerie feeling during that time period in that area.
Yeah. So I'm sharing right here his next set of victims. That's Darlene Farron and Michael, or I think that's just Darlene Farron. I should double check. But this was his second murder on the 4th of July in 1969 at Blue Rock Springs in Vallejo, California. Again, they were just parked in Farron's car when a man approached them and fired several shots into the vehicle. Both Farron and Maggio, were hit multiple times, but only Farron died from her injuries at the scene, while Michael survived despite being shot multiple times, which is crazy. I mean, it's a very traumatic thing to go through.
Oh, she's probably scarred for life. Or I'm sorry, she passed away, right? And he lived?
Yeah, he lived. Despite being shot multiple times. I mean, they both were, but I guess she got the more deadly end of it.
Yep, and then you got the survivor's guilt on top of that, which I don't know if everybody deals with, but I'm imagining, a lot of people do deal with that. Yeah, that had to really mess them up in the head.
Yeah. I mean, survivor's guilt is a real thing.
Yo, absolutely.
In a situation like that, that's
traumatizing.
That's very tough to come back from.
Yeah.
Let's see. Now, I'm going to pull up another photo for his next victim. This is Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard. Here we go. This is them. Now, background on these murders. This was on September 27th, 1969 in Lake Berryessa in Napa County, California. Brian Hartnell was only 20 and Cecilia Shepard was 22. And they were relaxing by the lake when a man approached them wearing a black hood and a cross-like symbol on the front, like we saw earlier. And he tied them up with a clothesline and proceeded to stab them repeatedly. Hartnell survived the attack, but Shepard succumbed to her injuries 2 days later. I don't know, man. Like, it's like just imagining that and just, I bet you at some point you're just like, dude, I just want to die, to just fucking kill me.
Yep.
But he survives, and then imagine just the paranoia too after that, just saying, fuck, what if he's after me? What if he's looking for me because he didn't finish me off? But it seems like, dude. Well, the pattern I'm seeing here too is just, it's young couples, like you said, but the motive never was really put out there because no one knows why. But the common theme here is they're couples.
True.
Could it be
younger? Yeah, because maybe
because we could talk about this in another episode. But you remember the Santa Monica shooter or Santa Barbara? Do you remember that guy? It was pretty recent, not recent, but it's been years now. But it's more modern. He went around Santa Barbara, filming videos like weird shit, and he was always complaining about how girls were falling for like the dumbest guys, and that he was a guy that had a lot of like he had money. His dad was a movie producer, like a famous movie. I think it was for the Hunger Games. Yeah, so he had a lot of envy, and he hated seeing couples. And there was a time where he actually saw a couple just chilling, and he actually went up to them and like spilled his drink on them or something like that, just because of how jealous he was. And so because of that, because of girls who never wanted to have sex with him, as he would say, he would eventually lead to just shooting. Like he murdered his roommates first, and then he went on like a killing spree before ultimately dying. I think he shot himself, or the cop shot him. But yeah, so
damn,
just seeing this, like just a list of his victims, kind of saying like, wow, it's just, couples. But obviously that's not the case with the last victim, which was Paul Stein. So that's kind of just like, okay, so that guy was just by himself. That was the guy you were talking about, the taxi cab driver.
That was Stein. Okay.
Yeah. So.
Oh yeah. Okay.
They actually have full color photos of this. Okay, let's look for it.
Let's go.
That's what we do inside the cave, baby. We go inside this. But Paul Stein was a taxi cab driver who was murdered, just doing his job, which is so unfortunate.
Now I wonder if the Zodiac Killer was a passenger. I never came across that, but I'm wondering if he was a passenger and did some like executions.
He was a passenger. He was
okay.
A passenger, and he actually asked, Paul Stein to take him to a specific place and say like, "Hey, can you take me here?" And ended up, going for a ride for a little bit. Then he shot him in the back of the head while going for that ride with him. Here it is.
That's wild.
Is it up here? Oh, here it is. Sorry. Here it is. That's Paul Stein.
Fuck.
Sorry, viewers. I mean, you're inside the cave, so this is what you're going to see inside the cave. We kind of show you guys everything here. But yeah, so He was shot in the back of the head. So I'm just going to go ahead and read the details of this. This was on October 11th, 1969. Like I said, this was his last confirmed murder that he owned up to. And this was in the Presidio Heights neighborhood of San Francisco, California. Sounds fancy.
Yeah,
Stein,
the Presidio is very fancy.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Paul Stein, who was only 29, was working as a cab driver when he picked up a passenger who happened to be the Zodiac Killer. And the Zodiac Killer requested to be taken to a specific location. And at some point during the ride, the passenger shot Stein in the head and fled the scene. Stein was found dead in his cab, making the Zodiac Killer's final confirmed murder victim. And like you said, he confirmed it by giving him a piece of the bloody shirt.
Oh, man. And there was lots of that on that shirt.
Yeah.
There was lots of that blood on that shirt. That is pretty bad.
Yeah, so the letter that was sent after the murder, he didn't necessarily explicitly confess that he murdered Paul Stein, but he did send correspondence to newspapers and law agencies that which he claimed responsibility for the murders and threatened to kill again. And I do remember reading somewhere that, you know, he had sent evidence like, oh, here's a shirt, you know. But all of those were kind of just like claims that people were stating. But yeah, so as far as his victims goes, those are all at least the confirmed victims that we've gone through. Now the next part that I wanted to bring us through was the suspect profiles. We actually kind of went through the suspect profiles, right?
Yeah.
We kind of went through that. So now the forensic analysis and DNA evidence. There wasn't really much DNA that they could find because if they did, they would have found him by now, right? But There wasn't really anything for them to pin and say like, oh, this was our guy. Which happened to be this guy, right? This was a bunch of like a mashup of like descriptions of who they said the killer was, and as you can see, the outlines of the multiple, you know, just looks like an everyday man blending in, right? And that's what's scary, because a lot of times when these murderers it's just they look like everyday people, despite some.
He kind of looks like the picture of like the Unabomber a little bit, which is kind of odd.
Yeah, definitely. You say that, like, yeah.
He's got the BCGs, like the boot camp glasses, the glasses they give you in boot camp.
Pretty stylish now.
Now who would have thunk? Who would have thunk?
Right.
Let's just hope the bell bottoms don't come back.
Oh, they're kind of coming back.
No.
Yeah, but yeah, so the kind of things that led to their investigation to kind of lead them into trying to track these guys, they did fingerprint analysis. Obviously, they relied heavily on forensic and DNA analysis to try and track down the Zodiac Killer. But first, obviously, that comes to mind is a fingerprint analysis, and investigators collected fingerprints from crime scenes and evidence associated with the Zodiac Killer's communications, such as letters and envelopes. While some partial prints were recovered, they did not match any known suspects or individuals in law enforcement databases. So that went cold pretty quickly. Now, the handwriting analysis, like we discussed earlier with the suspect profiles, like Arthur Allen, right? And Richard Gajkowski, like they tried to analyze their handwriting, and handwriting samples from potential suspects, including Arthur Leigh Allen, and were compared to the handwriting of the Zodiac Killer's letters. However, some experts identify similarities between the two, but these findings were universally not accepted and did not provide conclusive evidence. So the handwriting kind of went dead. And in 2002, which is surprisingly like recent, DNA analysis, the San Francisco Police Department submitted DNA evidence from an envelope believed to be sent by the Zodiac Killer to a private laboratory for analysis. Now, the DNA analysis produced a partial genetic profile, but unfortunately it did not match any profiles in the DNA databases at the time. Subsequent attempts to extract DNA from other items linked to the case, such as stamps and envelopes, have also failed to yield conclusive results. See, that's crazy. They got a partial genetic profile and they didn't get anything from it. It's like they're right there. But
Yep.
they don't have them in the databases. And then the next,
Which pretty much means he's never been, well, yeah, because when you get arrested, they take your
fingerprints.
fingerprint. They don't take your DNA yet. So had they had done that, they might have found him. But that only applies if this dude, because he might have been a I don't want to say an outstanding citizen, or he might have put on that facade as an outstanding citizen. Obviously, he wasn't. He was a fucking cold-blooded murderer. But it doesn't seem like he never gotten any type of trouble where he had to get fingerprinted at any point, whether that's for like theft or, more petty crimes.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, that's interesting. He was someone that you would not suspect necessarily of doing it, other than, the list of suspects we went over. So yeah, I don't know. It's one of those ones that are just really baffling. That's really baffling.
Oh man. Yeah, and then so other than that, they also had criminal profiling, where behavioral analysts and criminal profilers have studied the Zodiac Killer's communications, crime scenes, and patterns of behavior to develop profiles for the perpetrator. But like I said, there's a lot of inconsistencies, and because of that led to the multiple killer theory. So the criminal profiling kind of was like a cold trail as well. And ballistic analysis was also done at every murder scene, and so ballistic analysis was conducted on the bullets recovered from crime scenes to determine if they were fired from the same weapon. While some similarities were found between the bullets, no definitive link was established due to limitations in technology and the condition of the evidence. So overall, forensic and DNA analysis have provided valuable insights into the Zodiac Killer case, but their limitations, including the degradation of evidence over time and advances in forensic technology, have hindered efforts to definitively identify the perpetrator. Despite these challenges, ongoing advancements in forensic science offer hope for potential breakthroughs in the future. But even then, when they say they find this out, it might be too little too late. It's just, why does it matter now? He's dead. But at least they could find, hey, this is the guy,
Yeah, at least it would be. I guess it would be a win for the police department. It would be a win for the slain victims' families. So at least kind of know, you know what I mean. So I think that would offer a little bit of clarity to those folks.
Yeah, and it's a good point that there's families out there who would like that closure. Because what if they feel like, oh, my son was targeted by someone he knew, and it can cause a lot of tension in families thinking they know who, someone in my family did it. It's just, but like you said, yeah, it's people want it for closure, but also at the time, it's like the people who probably want closure are also probably getting old and might not care anymore, because a lot of time has passed and people's lives have gone forward without it already.
Yep.
But yeah, so I think we touched a good amount of kind of like briefly. I mean, I know we're kind of just running through this because that's our intentions. This is our first episode. We're going to be running through this more, but I do want to talk about, fast forward to now and his pop culture impact on all of this, because it's very, like I said, movies that just kind of nods to him, like in the Batman movie. I wanted to ask you, what were some significant impact on pop culture that you noticed that the Zodiac Killer has left up until this day?
Wow. So, I mean, obviously we do got a few movies that have came out from this. We go back to like the Riddler, right? So that symbol, I feel like, was kind of tailored off of the Zodiac Killer, because the Riddler would have riddles and ciphers, if you will, and so did the Zodiac Killer. Man, magazines. I mean, there's so many magazines that, and I think at that time, Like when you go to the grocery store and you see can't even name the name of the magazines, but there's just a shit ton of magazines right before you go to checkout. And I feel like at that time, you have to remember there was no social media, right? There was hardly any internet. So, I mean, this is like on probably all the newspapers, all the magazines. So people were taking this home and reading this. And other than the news, this was kind of their way of getting new information for that. Mm-hmm. Even I don't know if it had like a lot to do with his pop culture, but even like in his ciphers, he had a lot of like symbolism, I guess you will, a lot of symbolism in that. And it's still with us today because it hasn't been solved yet. And so it still has that allure to it. And it still has that kind of creepy, chilling effect that people are still, I mean, we're sitting here talking about it right now, you and me.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of, it was definitely a big deal. And yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
that's,
there's a lot of internet communities that are still kind of like committed to trying to solve this together and there's a community I know on Reddit that's trying to decipher his cryptic messages. It's very cool to see that people are so engaged in that, and the hunt continues, and this is kind of like our closing, we're kind of on the end to wrap it up. And really, I just wanted to talk about how the hunt still continues, and that there's hasn't really been any recent developments on this, because it's just, I think there's a lot of interest. Like there's not much interest in it anymore because so much time has gone by and he could be dead already. And what's the point anymore? What's the point of using all the resources, right? But the most recent years, it's just the only things that have happened recently to hunt him is just that they're trying to extract DNA evidence from items linked to the Zodiac Killer. But even then, like we said earlier, it didn't bring up anything. So I feel like this is just one of those cases that's going to be infamous and it's going to go cold.
I agree. And if you don't mind, before we wrap up, I want to read one cipher that, from what I have came across, has been decoded.
Okay.
And this will just leave some like lasting creepy thoughts for those listening.
And then this will actually lead into our next episode where we're going to break down his cryptic messages.
Oh, then maybe.
So you should just do it. Just go.
Maybe we should. Okay.
Read this and give people some interest out, because there's a lot more letters. But go.
Okay. Cool. So it was called the Z340 cipher. And this is the one that he sent to San Francisco Chronicle on the 8th of November back in 1969. And it was a total of 340 characters. And that was arranged in like a grid format.
Okay.
And the cipher was decoded by a team of 3 people: Sam Blake, Donald Hardin, and former U.S. Navy commander named George J. Ha. Okay. And they ended up cracking this, and this is just really creepy here. So, it says, I'm going to read it. The way I'm going to read it is the way that these words should be pronounced, but he was not very good at spelling. Either that, or this is the best that they can do to decipher the code. But it says, I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest, because man is the most dangerous animal of all. To kill something gives me the most thrilling experience. It is even better than getting your rocks off with a girl. The best part of it is when I die, I will be reborn in paradise, and those that I have killed will have become my slaves. I will not give you my name because you will try to slow down or atop my collection of slaves for my afterlife. Super creepy, man. That was it.
Oh,
That was it. And I did my best trying to read it, but the grammar is just not really there. But it says this is a more thrilling experience than getting your rocks off with a girl. So I think that also alludes to the two couples that he tried to kill. Obviously, we had a survivor from each couple, but yeah, the dude was clearly a psychopath.
Oh, man. So for our viewers right here, while we close this up, this was the cipher that Chef was reading that was deciphered. This was how it originally came in. This is what it looked like. So to decipher this, like you said, it took a team to take care of that. So it's so interesting to me, and I'm fascinated with how there's people who can actually interpret this, because if you hand it to me, I'm like, I don't know what the fuck I'm looking at.
Yep. Nope.
But to this day, he remains as one of the most elusive killers we'll ever see, and we'll never find out who he is, just because of how elusive this guy is, right? And I do have a theory though on who this is, because it kind of checks some boxes for me on who this elusive character. He's elusive, he hasn't been caught, and to this day there's a lot of mystery surrounding him. So I'm gonna leave you guys off with my theory on who this is, and here it is. It's fucking Bigfoot, baby.
Dude. Oh my, that's fucking hilarious.
Thanks for tuning in. Oh, wait, sorry. Didn't mean to.
Sorry, it had to have been Bigfoot.
Yeah, it has to be Bigfoot. But yeah, but that's my theory. That's just for fun, just to kind of end it on a light note. But just to wrap this up, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. This is our first installation into the Murder Mysteries segment that Chef and I will be doing. So our next segment, I think we're going to be going over, kind of doing a deep dive in all the ciphers that the Zodiac Killer wrote. And we're going to try and research on how people are decoding this, what kind of keys they're using, and maybe we can crack something online together. I fucking doubt it, but it's worth a try. I think it'll be fun. But yeah, anything closing that you want to say, Chef, about this and what our viewers can look forward to?
Yeah. Well, first of all, this was a banger. I'm so happy that you brought this idea up and that you have called upon me to come in and help out with this, because it's badass, dude. This is badass. I enjoy doing this. I enjoy doing the research. And I really can't wait, because there are tons of unsolved murder mysteries and or just murders in general that I can't wait to dig into a little bit deeper. You know, you can watch a movie on it, you can watch documentaries on it, but to sit down and to be reading and going through all the research kind of hits you a little different. Mm-hmm. And better than that, having the conversation about it. So yeah, I'm stoked, and I thank you for having me.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, so I had a great time doing this. We're gonna be like Chef said, there's more episodes that you guys are gonna be looking forward to. We're gonna be going over the Black Dahlia. You know, that's another chilling case that I find very, very interesting. Just the information surrounding it, and just a bunch of other murder mysteries that you could probably think of. We're gonna dive in, but our next segment, I'd like us to get into those cryptic messages, because those are interesting to me. You guys tune in with us and we can read them together and kind of see what the messages are, and maybe we can, spark a crowd that wants to help decipher it with us. But other than that, thank you everyone for tuning in to Inside the Cave Murder Mysteries, the Zodiac Killer. But before we let you go, please check out our sponsors at safelightcandle.com. They have an assortment of lightings that may fit your needs for your house, studio, wherever you need LED lighting, accents, whatever. They have it at low prices, so please visit safelightcandle.com, and please consider joining our Patreon. The link can be found on our website, K4V3.com. And lastly, you can find me proper here on the cave And you can find Chef here in the cave with us. He's on our team. But Chef, I also want you to go ahead and tell people about where they can find you.
Yeah. So I have a little show called Sunday Night Secret Society that me and my co-host Hank roll that out. So we usually do shows every Friday. We talk about everything and everything and anything. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so if you want to find me over there, check me out. I'm on most major platforms. You can find me at Instagram at Secret Society, Sunday Night Secret Society Pod. So I'm always posting, just kind of the wild, the weird, and the crazy stuff over there. But yeah, other than that, that's about all I got, man.
There you go. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And if you're into golf shit, I have a brand that we're launching called Proper Golf Company. You can follow us on Instagram at Proper Golf Co. And you can visit our website at www.propergolfco.com, where you can find premium quality golf clothing. I golf myself, obviously, and Chef over here. So please check it out. We're getting ready for our drop. So subscribe to our mailing list and give us a follow on Instagram. So other than that, I'd like to leave you guys out. Chef, thank you for joining me today. I'll see you on the next deep
Yes,
dive.
sir. Yes, sir.
See you guys there. And I think it's Bigfoot.
Let's go. Let's go. The man, the myth, the legend.
It's Bigfoot.